Welcome to the luncheon. While we are finishing up your lunch, and hopefully you'll be getting a dessert soon, we have a special keynote speaker coming from the Office of Management Budget, the chief architect for the country, the nation's chief architect, Kshemendra, who formerly served as the executive director of NEEM, is a friend of the program, serves on our steering committee as an ex officio member, and I thought it impossible to find someone who moved as fast as I did in the federal government, who had expectations that a 2-week year really isn't a 2-year project. So you know, moving things in a time frame where we could actually become agile. And I feel like I am working in slow motion when I look at what he's taking on and the initiatives that he's got going on today. So with no further ado, Kshemendra.
Hello, everybody. This is a lot of fun for me. I feel like I'm coming home. It's great to see a lot of old friends, new friends. I wanted to give a shout out to my state and local partners. I remember to see Bob Bomer over here from Global Justice, the National Center for State Courts. There's a lot of the success we've had with NEEM that you all have had is because of the grassroots activity coming from the states, state, local, tribal involvement and stakeholders. It's a particular source of pride for me to see a national effort that comes up in such a grassroots way with the NEEM, the National Information Exchange Model. It's a little bit of a trip down memory lane for me, too. I remember the first time I was at a conference like this was in San Diego, and it was a wonderful venue, great conference. I remember arm wrestling with Pat McCurry about why don't we call it the NEEM conference. He said, no, we got to call it the GJXDM conference. Who here remembers what GJXDM is, right? Is it a distant memory, or a few folks here willing to admit to GJXDM? Well, we were in Chicago about 2 years ago, and that was a lot of fun too. And we started a tradition. I guess we're going to follow through on today. Here, wow, so many folks, such a diverse audience. I want to go through a few slides to talk about the federal enterprise architecture. That's my main responsibility. Give folks some context of what we're doing in terms of modernization of the federal IT portfolio and where NEEM fits into that. I'm going to try to go fast so that there's some time for questions, and then we have a best of NEEM activity that we're going to go through. So I think these are my yes, okay. So I have the technology. So this is an eye chart. I don't expect anybody to read it, but I want to just highlight a few things. As a government, we spend about $76 billion on information technology. That's as reported by agencies. Doesn't include embedded IT, battlefield systems, satellites, things like that. Doesn't include the classified spend. It's a big number. And it's organized vertically. What you see there is a chart by different agencies. But it gets worse. Within agencies, you have bureaus. Within bureaus, you have programs. There's about 900 major big programs across the government. Money's appropriated this way. It's managed very much a vertical orientation. But the point of architecture, one of the main purposes of architecture, is to look horizontally across the government at common missions, common business functions, common technology. What you're looking at on this slide is the same $76 billion, the same about 7,500, 7,800 line items in the Federal Exhibit 53. That's the IT budget. Organized, though, in crosscuts. A couple of observations you'll see on this slide. We spend more on back office activities, it's about 50% versus front office activity. In the DoD, they call that tooth to tail ratio, right? So we bigger in the tail, little smaller in the tooth, as it were. When you look at management of government resources, the biggest part of that is IT infrastructure. We spend something on the order of 40% plus or minus on IT infrastructure across the government. much of that is commodity-oriented infrastructure, networks, data centers, end-user computing, the kinds of things that you heard Vince Cerf talk about earlier today, and you've heard undoubtedly Vivek Kundra talk about moving to the cloud. On the mission side, and that's you see the red core mission. There's a variety of different missions we're involved in. One of the ones I'll point out is healthcare. You've heard John talk about that earlier today. It's about $6.7 billion as reported by agencies. It's a key challenge for us is interoperability across this spend. Right? Being able to interoperate in the government, to be able to interoperate with our state, local, tribal partners, to be able to deliver services to citizens. To be able to do that, you need to have a degree of semantic harmonization. You need to have frameworks like NEEM that help you understand how you can package these communications. Now, when you look at this, you say, how do you get traction on something like this? Well, within the federal architecture, we segment the problem, break it into pieces. 3 key ideas: core mission-oriented segments or pieces, healthcare, defense, homeland security, law enforcement, information sharing, things like that. Business service segments, things like financial management, human resources, IT infrastructure. And then crosscuts, enterprise services, things like identity, credential, and access management. Information sharing based on frameworks like NEEM. Using this kind of an approach, we're able to organize the portfolio. A key idea is defining standard segments so that whether you're in HHS or the Department of Justice or Homeland Security, Department of Labor, you're defining IT infrastructure in the same way so that when we build modernization roadmaps, we're modernizing the same kinds of things. It sounds like a simple idea, but there's actually a lot of folks involved, a lot of opportunity for fragmentation. So I get asked a lot, where are we going with architecture in this administration? And the Obama administration hasn't yet put out its management agenda. It's the right folks are working through that, doing all the things you'd imagine they're doing. What I want to highlight is where we're actually doing architecture today. And that, I think, gives you some ideas about where we're going in the context of the Obama management agenda. 4 key themes. We're focused on managing the portfolio, the $76 billion spend. We want to improve efficiency and effectiveness. We want to enable open and transparent government. And we want to secure federal cyberspace. And what I've got here is a few areas where the federal enterprise architecture and architecture-related programs are driving. This is not the full picture, but this is, I think, of interest to this community. So underneath managing the portfolio, I'm going to go through some of these in a little more detail. Now, this is a very busy chart, and the author of this chart happens to be sitting in the audience. I want to give congratulations to John Teeter. In addition to his role at the Health and Human Services, he's also co-chairing a committee for the Federal CIO Council on reforming and updating what we call Circular A11. Now, this is a little bit of inside the Beltway, but A11 is the core circular that defines how we do the budget process. Those of you in public service, right, you know that's the core management process in the government, whether it's federal, state, local, it's the budget. Well, within the budget process, we're very focused on performance. How do we link budget requests to agency strategic plans, to architecture and architecture plans looking at crosscuts, to specific investment proposals, to program performance, to cost and schedule performance. Well, in doing this, the main point of this slide is that we're currently working on a normalized platform-independent data model, right, across all of these things. The way I think of it is, how do you go from good intentions, how do you have a line of sight from good intentions all the way out to societal impact? And so we're doing this right now with the Object Management Group, an industry-based standards organization. Quite excited about it because it gives us the opportunity to move a lot of our management frameworks from being kind of perceived as compliance-oriented to being a natural artifact of using tools to do things like architecture, building an IPD, using project management software. Right? And you can get there if you have standard data, and industry embraces these data models. The idea of standardization is also something that's very familiar to this audience. So I've talked about one other theme that we're focusing on in terms of managing the portfolio is the idea of modernization roadmaps. We're very keen that in each of the lines of business whether it's financial management, human resources, the federal health architecture, so on, that we want to have a consistent shared target architecture that gets pretty granular, pretty prescriptive, that's shared across all the agencies. The key to doing this is that you have a consistent methodology that's based on best practices. We have something we call the Federal Segment Architecture Methodology that does that. So the different steps in the process going from strategic planning to execution are shown here. And this represents the FSAM. And by the way, there's a reference on this. It's www.fsam, Federal Segment Architecture Methodology, fsam.gov. These 5 steps that are shown here break down into a whole set of activities, and underneath that whole set of tasks, and their sample artifacts. It's being used successfully across the government now. But it all starts in the beginning, right? Understanding who your key stakeholders are and having effective governance. This is something also that NEEM has done an exceptional job at, is being able to expand the governance in a federated manner. So in the beginning, you're looking at who should be at the table and how do you go forward. Next, what are you trying to accomplish? That's step 2. What are your information requirements? And what's your conceptual architecture? Now, this is quite an interesting connection point with NEEM, because if you do this right, you should end up with things that look like information exchange package descriptions in the conceptual architecture stage. Building reference, build-to, open standards for information exchange. Think about the power of that, whether you're talking about the federal health enterprise architecture, financial management, law enforcement information sharing. All the different participants that apply to that segment have a standard that they can build to. As you have those build-to standards, you put it into a modernization roadmap and go through the CIPIC process. In the federal government, that's our business case process for IT investments. It goes through that and then into the budget, and you execute when the budget's approved. So shared modernization roadmaps are a key initiative for us. Reusable secure information exchanges. I think this is really on point, too, for this audience. We really believe that semantic harmonization is key. Why is that? The problems we face today as a society are inherently cross-boundary. Right? Whether you're talking about law enforcement information sharing, the National Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative, healthcare, climate change, financial regulation, all of these things go across boundaries. They go across sectors of government. They go across domains. They come across levels of government. And in order to be able to share information, you need to have some degree of semantic harmonization. Now, it's been a big year for NEEM this last year. The NEEM UCOR is a standard that the Department of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence Community have promulgated. The NEEM community worked through a harmonization activity, so there's a shared universal core now. That's actually a pretty big deal when you think about that, right? Think about the footprint of the Department of Defense and how diverse they are, and coming NEEM and its roots in the state and local community, and coming to agreement on something like a universal core that's so fundamental and foundational. So that's a big thing. The use of NEEM with the Recovery Act, recipient reporting, that's actually going to be happening in the month of October, right? The first round of recipient reports. That's all based on NEEM IEPDs. That touches all 50 states, grants, contracts. It's several 100,000, recipients. There's been, discussion this morning about the health and human services. I think there'll be some more a little bit later on today. There was a discussion this morning, a session on NEEM and XBRL, the harmonization that's going on there. This second to last bullet is pretty interesting for me. We've actually seen now large organizations see cost savings, cost avoidance through the use of NEEM. It's not hard to understand. From planning through design, if you can reuse data elements, if you can reuse reference exchanges, you would expect to see some savings. What's interesting is that the community is mature enough now that people are reporting these sort of savings. Pretty amazing stuff.